So a weird story from growing up on the farm. Okay. Well, so back around, I grew up in this little farm in Cape Breton. My parents moved from Chicago when I was a kid, and I'm talking really little. This is 1974. So I was under a year old. My brother was 5, and my parents decided they wanted to go to the east coast of Canada. They're not happy with the way the U.S. is going, so they end up in Canada and in Cape Breton, and a little tiny town called Judique. And you pronounce it Judique, not Judique. It's like it's one syllable, Judique. So I grew up there, and my parents, my dad's from Chicago, my mom was from a number of places, including New Jersey, and we moved to this little, farm in Cape Breton, like a mixed farm. So we had cows and sheep, and quite a lot of sheep. At the height of that farm, we would have, had 40 or probably 20 or 30 cows and probably several hundred sheep. So it's a lot, right? And we had chickens and pigs and all this stuff. And one of the things that we had with the chickens was a rooster. And when I'm little, and I'm talking, like 4 or 5, we have this rooster, and some animals like children, and some don't like children. So I have this rooster that is not a fan of me, and I'm little. And I obviously would go to the barnyard with my dad and my mom. And every time I go to the barnyard, he'd go right at me and just jump on me and beat me with his wings and try to scratch me, peck me. And what you have to understand is, as a kid, that's a pretty big animal. When you're like 4 years old, that thing's like, up to like there. It's not small. So it'd be like a large dog jumping on you that was a rooster. I guess that wasn't the best analogy I've ever done. Anyway, so that's what happened. So as this continues and continues, and my dad's getting sick of this rooster chasing after me, and finally, he and my mom just are like, that's enough. We're not gonna have this rooster anymore. I'm getting rid of him. Now, chickens, when you grow up on a farm and you have chickens and want to butcher them for meat, you actually cut their heads off. That's how it works. And we had this old barn at the time, and there was a hill beside the barn, and my parents had this big block. It was obviously from a tree. To me, it was enormous. It probably was like a big tree block there, and they would, that's where they would do the deed on the chickens. And so, now if you cut a chicken's head off, the term running around like a chicken with their head cut off, it's a real thing, because chickens run like crazy. You cut a chicken's head off, and that body goes bananas. It just runs and runs and runs and runs for probably like 15 to 30 seconds, somewhere in there. And they just run around like mad, flapping their wings and jumping. And then after a while, they lose enough blood, and they kind of figure out they're dead. And then they fall over, and that's the end of that. It's a bit of a process, though. And as a kid, my parents would, cut the heads off the chickens. The chickens would run around like crazy. But the problem is, if you cut it off in a flat area, the chickens will run in every direction, right? You don't want that. You want them to all be roughly in the same area. So the trick was that they cut their heads off, like they had this block at the top of the hill, and they would, cut the head off. Chicken runs down the hill because of the gravity. They might run in a couple directions, but they, very quickly would end up weaving their way down the hill and end up at the bottom of the hill, expiring there. And then, you pick them up and finish the deal with that. And on another note, taking the feathers off a chicken's not an easy job, and you actually have to dunk them in boiling water and then strip them off. It's not pleasant. It's not pretty. It smells bad. Nothing fun about it. So the whole chicken killing and then preparing them to have them, to be able to eat them later is not necessarily a fun thing. Anyway, I digress a little bit there. So my dad and mom decide that's it. They're going to get rid of this rooster. So I still remember this very clearly. they got a hold of the rooster, my dad, I think my mom's holding it down. My dad's going to chop its head off. And my mom's like, Devin, you stand up the hill, stand up here, because I'm up, probably 10 or 15 feet away, give or take, from the rooster. And the idea is that, you know, I'm going to be away from the rooster and be on up the hill from the rooster, right? So the rooster is going to jump off and run around, do his thing, and end up expired at the bottom of the hill. That's what will happen. So anyway, they hold the rooster down, and my dad grabs the axe. I still remember that rooster was looking right at me. He's like one eye. He was just staring at me, or at least I felt like he was. And it seemed like the whole thing was happening, taking a really long time. When I think back on it, it seems like it was almost in slow motion. And my dad, you know, my mom holds the rooster, and my dad swings the axe, and he takes the head off. And my mom lets go of the rooster. And that rooster springs up, like they all do, and makes a beeline right toward me, and jumps on me and starts beating me with his wings and clawing me while spraying blood in every direction. And I still remember there was just this moment of it coming toward me and getting bigger and bigger, and my mom and dad's faces like this, because they just couldn't, you know, no chicken does this, right? They all run down the hill because it's gravity, and they don't know where they're going. Somehow that rooster, with 360 degrees to go and a hill working against him, he still disliked me enough that he ended up back up the hill and jumped on me, beat me with his wings, spraying blood, and, you know, my dad ran over and kicked him off me, and then, you know, that was the end of the rooster. But it's kind of that's one of those stories you think about and you think, how is that even possible? And boy, did he not like me. That's a rooster who had a bit of an axe to grind. Pardon the pun. He definitely was not a fan of me, and his body knew where to go when this was over.